everyone, welcome back to InfoGamer. Thanks for tuning in. In our last video for our snake playlist, we showed you how to create food that spawns into our scene. Now we're going to show you how to create the interaction between our snake and the food. So if our snake runs into the food with its head, then it should increment its max size, which will then increment its current size, and our snake will grow longer. Then we're going to also show you how to respawn our food into a new location. And so let's get started. Now the first thing that we're going to want to do is open up our snake script in Visual Studios. Once you have it open, we're going to need to add a new namespace to the top of our script. So right beneath using system.collections, we're going to add using system. Once you have that, it's time to create a new action. Now we've done these before in different videos in the past. This is going to be a way to broadcast a message to our game controller script that our snake has collided to with a food object. And so to do this, beneath our private snake next variable, we're going to need to create a static public action, and in carets we're going to have it be of type string, and we're going to call it hit. Once you've created that variable, we're going to create a void on trigger enter function, and the parameters for this function are a collider, and we're going to call it other, and then in parentheses we have our body, and we're going to have two if statements in this function. The first one is going to be if hit, so our action, does not equal null. Then we want to send the tag of the other object to our game controller script with the hit action. So we're going to say hit, and in parentheses we're going to pass our other dot tag as the string parameter, other dot transform dot tag. The next if statement, we want to check to see whether the object we hit was a food, and if it was, then we want to destroy the food object. So we're going to say if other dot tag equals food. Whoops, I need that in parentheses or quotes. So food. Then inside the body of that if statement, we're going to say destroy other dot game object. And right here in this hit, I'm passing other dot transform dot tag. I can change that to other dot tag. It doesn't really matter. It's actually passing the same value. But once you have that on trigger enter, it's time to go over to our game controller script where we are going to receive the message from our hit action. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is create an onEnable function. So void on enable, and in our curly braces we want to subscribe to our hit action. So we say snake dot hit, and then we say plus equals, and then we're going to have a hit function in our game controller script that we're going to call. Now what we need to do is create an onDisable function where we will unsubscribe from the hit action. So onDisable, and inside we say snake dot hit, and we say minus equals hit. Now we need to create this hit function. But before we do that, I'm going to create a new variable, and it's going to be an integer. So I'm going to say public int, and I'm going to call it score. Because every time we pick up a new food, we want to increment the score. So now that we have the score variable created, let's scroll down to the bottom, and we are going to create a hit. So let's say void hit, and the parameters for this function are a string, and we're going to call it what was sent. So what was sent is going to be the tag of the other object that we collide with when our snake runs into something. Now inside this function we're going to have two if statements, but we're only going to write one of them in this video, and that's going to be to see whether the message that was received is equal to food. So let's say if what was sent equals food, and then open the body. And since we already destroyed the food object when we collided with it, we want to spawn or instantiate a new food object. And in order to do that, all we have to do is call our food function. Now we want to increment our max size. So we'll call max size and then plus plus semicolon. And we want to increment our score. So we'll say score plus plus semicolon. Now that should be everything that we need. Let's go ahead and save it and see how it works. So we need to save both scripts. So I'm just going to go and hit save all. We'll go back to Unity. So before we hit play, there's a few things that we're going to need to do in Unity. Now, because we're using an onTriggerEnter function in our snake script, we need to use triggers and not colliders. And so with our food and our snake prefab, we have isTrigger not checked. And so let's go ahead and check that box on both these prefabs. And now, because we're using onTrigger, when you're using onTrigger or onCollisionEnter functions, you need to have a rigid body on at least one of the objects. And so let's add it to our snake object. So you can type in RI or rigid body at the top when you select add component, and it'll come up with the two different object options for rigid body. But because we're using a box collider instead of a 2D box collider, we need to use a rigid body and not a rigid body 2D. And now what we need to do is deselect using gravity or use gravity, because we don't want our cubes to fall off the screen. Now there's one more thing that I want to do before we hit play, and in order to help with the collision and make it so that it's not until our snake spawns a head cube on our food, we want to select our food and just change down the scale in the X, Y, and Z direction just by a tiny bit. So I'm going to go 0.95 on all three of these. Once we do that, now we can go ahead and hit play. So I'm going to go towards the food and try and pick it up. And we picked it up, and we're one cube longer. So you can see now we have 6 snake components rather than 4. And if I pick up this food, now we have 7. And we're going to keep growing as long as we keep picking up food. Now the next thing that we need to do is make it so that there is a collision when we run into our own body. So right there I ran into myself, and so that should have killed me. But because we don't have any code for it, it's not going to happen just yet. So in the next video we're going to show you how to do that. Make sure that you like and subscribe and share with your friends. We'll see you next time.